Hey everyone, this is Leftism Today here. I apologize for the shitty mic audio. There's been a lot of really bad stuff going on lately, and I don't feel like making a giant, fancy edited video. But if I do see a dumbass video like Marx was not a quote-unquote statist from someone like Cuck philosophy, who is essentially a bred to Brad Lib LARPing as a Marxist, if I see some bullshit like this, I'm gonna respond to this. And these type of videos really piss me off because 47,000 views 2 days ago, I believe, 140,000 subscribers, and yet all you can do is just make the dumbest, fucking, laziest leftcom arguments I've ever heard. And it doesn't piss me off as much as it just makes me fucking sad that people are really, really. I mean, this is like beyond ecstasy levels of lazy leftcom bullshit. This is just drivel. This is commodity production arguments to the nth degree. I mean, just watch.
There is a very common assumption propagated all over the political spectrum, both by Marxists and anti-Marxists, that for Marx, socialism is about state control, or at the very least presupposes state control. And this isn't that surprising. After all, in the Communist Manifesto, the most widely read Marx and Engels text, Marx lists 10 measures to be done immediately after the working class seizes state power, and these involve massive nationalization and strict centralization. Obviously, this can't be done without the heavy involvement of a state. But before we tackle this, let's rewind a little bit back for the beginners, and start with what at least most Marxists already agree on. For Marx, the state is something that must eventually be abolished. After all, communism is a classless, moneyless, and stateless society.
Now, the definition is very common, and I've used that definition, and we're going to go over definitions in this video, but communism is a classless, moneyless, and stateless society, but more important about communism is it's a mode of production that is developed far, far, far beyond what capitalism is. I don't think people understand what Marx was trying to say in Critique of the Gotha program. There are two main things that need to happen according to Marx and Critique of the Gotha program. Number one, the means of production have to reach a phenomenally high level of development beyond anything mankind has ever seen. We have to have an extreme, basically technological revolution in the means of production in order for communism to be reached. The second one is work is no longer the means of sustenance. Essentially, work is now a means of life. It is now how one derives their self worth rather than their sustenance from a wage. And those two conditions really have to be met for communism to be fully implemented. Now, the classlessness, I'll actually talk about all this in a bit because he gets to it, but let's continue.
For Marx, the existence of the state necessarily presupposes political alienation. This is because the social powers that people develop among themselves are alienated from them by being transferred to the state, and so all their actions are mediated by state bureaucracies. Already in 1844, when he wrote Critique of Hegel's Philosophy of Right, he said that in true democracy, the political state disappears. However, so the common narrative goes, before the state can be abolished, it must first be seized by the working class, utilized to establish socialism, and once communism is on the horizon, the state will naturally wither away.
And this is what I have a problem with. It's not about communism being on the horizon. Communism doesn't come out of magic. I mean, in terms of Marx's time before imperialism, those two would have implied. But now that we have, the development since Lenin, we know that world imperialism has to be essentially neutralized in order for communism to exist. So let's move on.
So this is the common narrative that you have likely seen before. First, you have capitalism, markets, the state, classes, all that. Then socialism emerges when workers take power. Under socialism, you still have the state and classes, but with the working class rather than the capitalist class being in power. Finally, once the bourgeoisie have been defeated, classes, money, and the state will finally disappear, and we have communism. This is an extremely common narrative, but it is not Marx's narrative. First of all, to avoid confusion, we should point out that Marx never distinguished between socialism and communism.
Yes, you did. Maybe if you perhaps read a fucking book, I wouldn't have to babysit you people, like I always do. But instead of reading a book, you decide to make videos about topics that you have no idea. Between capitalist and communist society, there lies the period of revolutionary transformation one to the other. Corresponding to this is also a political transformation period in which the state can be nothing but the revolutionary dictatorship of the proletariat. Notice the key word, state. Does communism have a state? No. How do we know? Go read Anti-Düring. What does Anti-Düring say? That the state is not abolished, it withers away, aka it becomes superfluous, neutralized, because the state no longer exists because the state is an instrument of class suppression. And if there are no more classes to be suppressed, if there is no more class struggle, then the state will no longer exist. That's communism. So, buddy, if you think communism and socialism are the same thing, how do you have a state without having a state? Like, you thought I was exaggerating in the intro, but these are the laziest fucking arguments. These are the laziest fucking leftcom arguments I've ever heard. The state is not abolished, it withers away. Like, okay, so the state has withered away in communism, but the state exists in the transitory period where it's the revolutionary dictatorship of the proletariat as an instrument of class struggle. Maybe if you spent 5 fucking minutes reading Marx, you would know this shit, and I wouldn't have to babysit you, dude. I wouldn't have to feed you Milky.
In the sense that the former comes first and the latter comes after. He didn't use the word socialism that often, referring to...
He didn't use the word socialism that often. Have you read the manifesto? Actually, I think he brings it up. But the whole program for its democratic clang is tainted through by the Lassallean sect's servile belief in the state, or what is no better, by a democratic belief in miracles, or rather, it is a compromise between these two kinds of miracles, both equally remote in socialism. Of socialism. Some parts of socialism he's referring to utopians, like he does in the manifesto, but or like in socialism, utopian and scientific, equally removed from socialism.
He used communism, and when he did use it, he usually used it interchangeably with communism, as they were generally used interchangeably in the socialist theory of his time. The only times that Marx or Engels actually distinguished socialism from communism was when they used socialism to refer to socialist tendencies they were against. For instance, in one preface to the Communist Manifesto, he and Engels say,
the only time they do it is to refer to tendencies they are against. I mean, you can try picking up a book, dude. You can try fucking picking up a book, dude. To accomplish this act of universal emancipation is the historical mission of the modern proletariat. To thoroughly comprehend the historical conditions and this very nature of this act, to impart to the now oppressed proletarian class a full knowledge of the conditions of the meaning of the momentous act it is called upon to accomplish. This is the task of the theoretical expression of the proletarian movement. Scientific socialism. Wow, I thought there was no scientific socialism. I think he confuses this. A lot of left comms who don't fucking read because they're morons will confuse, will think that Marx confuses or like equates socialism and communism, but that's not true at all. I mean, it literally says right in which the state can be nothing more than a revolutionary dictatorship of the proletariat. Doesn't refer to socialism. Like, notice how your problems would be solved if you just fucking read a book.
In 1847, socialism was a middle class movement, communism a working class movement. Socialism was, on the continent at least, respectable. Communism was the very opposite. And as our notion from the very beginning was that the emancipation of the working class must be that.
Yeah, the reason why he's saying socialism was respectable and communism was the very opposite is because socialism predates and communism predate Marx. I mean, have you read Utopian and Scientific? I mean, socialism, utopian, and scientific is about critiquing French utopians and anarchists. I mean, it's so tiring. Like, I can't even think of any. Like, I have to fucking babysit you
working
people.
class itself, there could be no doubt as to which of the two names we must take. Moreover, we have ever since been far from repudiating it.
The popular distinction between socialism and communism, where socialism is said to come first and then leads into communism afterwards, was popularized by Lenin.
Popularized by Lenin. Learn to read a fucking book, you moron. Popularized by Lenin.
Now, there is, of course, one significant distinction Marx did make in Critique of the Good of the Program, where he distinguished between lower phase
A pamphlet you did not read clearly.
communism and higher phase communism. In the lower phase, people must work for labor vouchers. These are not the same as money because they
Lower phase and higher phase communism. What is the least common denominator here? Communism. Communism is without a state. Communism is without a state, right? I think we can agree that communism is without a state. Socialism is with a state. This is socialism, okay? This right here, this is communism. Now, moron, communism does not come like the flick of a light switch. Communism comes in stages. Now, if you read this book, which you clearly haven't, called Capital Volume 1, you would know that Marx talks about the development of simple commodity exchange with the circuit CMC, and in Capital he gives the example of like linen, money, and then the use value of a family Bible. So essentially this is the first step into capitalism, is commodity exchange. You get one use value, you turn it into money, and then you use the use value of money, which is its value, to buy a family Bible, and then you consume this use value. Now, when you really start to get into capitalism, is when you get into MCM, which is money, commodity, money. Now, what you do is, instead of getting a commodity into money for a use value, you're instead using the commodity for a higher exchange value, aka M prime. So the commodity has to have some effect that makes M prime, and these are referred to as LP and MP in Capital in Volume 2, and basically the LP is the variable capital, adds value, means of production is the constant capital, and it transfers its value, but it doesn't actually add value. So basically, notice what I just summarized here. We're going in steps. First of all, CMC. This is a step towards capitalism. Then we get into MCM. This is a step towards capitalism. Now, eventually we go on in these phases until we reached generalized commodity production. Allow me to quote a book that you have clearly never read to you, Capital Volume 1. This is the free sale of the labor by itself. If the labor power is a commodity, and then commodity production is generalized, it becomes a typical form of production, and then it's generalized and perpetuated across society. This right here is what allows, as he says, the property laws of commodity production changing into capitalist appropriation. This is essentially, this paragraph right here, okay, is really the basis of what capitalism is as it develops, okay? Now notice how we went through several phases, okay? Marx realized that, hey, wait a minute, we look at capitalism, capitalism's been developing since feudalism, you know, like the events of feudalism developed capitalism. What Marx did is he didn't prescribe, this isn't Kropotkin here, he didn't prescribe these phases, he suggested these phases. He didn't say, in the lower phase of communism, humanity will use labor vouchers. He instead looked at previous society, for example, Japanese feudal society, and said, hey, wait a minute, in Japanese feudal society, they used, you know, like labor tokens. Oh, that's weird. You know, people will probably end up using, once money is abolished, people will probably end up using labor vouchers because that's what they'll feel most comfortable with, because we saw from previous society that, you know, the Japanese people in feudal Japan use labor vouchers to, you know, trade essentially the, you know, I don't want to say like, you know, the value, because there was no value in feudalism, but they essentially traded, you know, equal labor times for each other. So, you know, that's what he prescribed they would be most comfortable with. This isn't a fucking commandment from God. This is a prediction.
cannot be accumulated, kind of like a movie ticket. You use it once and then it's rendered invalid. Because labor vouchers cannot be accumulated, they cannot be turned into capital, hence not capitalist. These labor vouchers can then be used in exchange for debt.
Yeah, no accumulation, no circulation. That means that stuff like money is a means of payment, which is essentially interests and usuriers aren't able to form capital, essentially, which is capital is the increasing of its own exchange value in the circuit of
various products.
value.
In other words, lowerface communism still contains material incentives for work, as the amount of labor vouchers you receive depends on the number of hours you have worked. Once society reaches a sufficient level of development, productivity increases to the point of abundance, and people have become fully socialized into this new form of social life.
It's not about material incentives for work, but it's about exchanging the true least common denominator of products, which is human labor time.
We have entered the higher phase of communism. Labor vouchers are no longer necessary and are replaced by the principle from each according to ability to each according to need. Later, as popularized
Yeah, which isn't free access, by the way. Free access makes it sound like you don't. I don't know why he doesn't include class here, because you can have class without capital. But okay.
by Lenin, the lower phase of communism was termed socialism, and higher phase communism was termed simply communism.
Incorrect. First of all, citation needed. Second of all, socialism, okay, was not termed by Lenin. It was based off of the dictatorship of the proletariat.
But note that whether we're talking about the lower phase or the higher phase, it is still moneyless because money is replaced with labor vouchers. If it's moneyless, it is also classless because without money, there is no class.
Okay, so in order for you to make these two distinctions, you would have to prove that the higher phase and lower phase of communism are two separate mode of productions, which is false. These are one mode of production right here. But the thing is Marx doesn't believe that you just flip a light switch and then you're in another mode of production. There are processes in which you enter another mode of production. And so he theorized that people would go onto the lower phase of communism and then eventually the higher phase, and this is it's the inevitable result of the means of production advancing. I mean, what do you think the falling rate of profit is about? So, yeah, I mean, in order for you to make this argument, you would have to prove that these are two different modes of production. You would also have to contend with this. Between capitalist, one mode of production, and communist society, there lies a period of revolutionary transformation one to the other. That's socialism. Okay? Capitalist and communist society. This is communist society.
Replaced by the principle from each according to ability to each according to need. Later, as popularized by Lenin, the lower phase of communism was termed socialism, and higher phase communism was termed simply communism. But note that whether we're talking about the lower phase or the higher phase, it is still moneyless because money is replaced with labor vouchers. If it's moneyless, it is also classless because without money, there is no class that owns all the capital and uses it to wield power over the rest of society, and therefore stateless. Because for Marxists, a state is merely the means by which one class exerts its power over subordinate classes. No classes means no state. There are several crystal clear indications that Marx does not distinguish between socialism and communism as stages in a single development. For example, in Critique of the Gotha Program, he writes, "What we have to deal with here is a communist society, not as it has developed."
Wow, he said the word communist society. That means that he never mentioned socialism. Said the word like I'm not gonna tire you out.
On its own foundations, but on the contrary, just as it emerges from capitalist society, which is thus in every
stamped with the birthmarks of old society. I mean, thank you for literally proving my point. What do you think the phases are about, moron?
respect, economically, morally, and intellectually, still stamped with the birthmarks of the old society from whose womb it emerges. If communism was something that only develops after a long period of the development of socialism, this quote would not make sense. Instead, it's clear that even when not distinguishing between lower phase and higher phase, Marx speaks of communism as that which emerges right out of capitalism.
He speaks of communism as the movement towards the higher phase of communism, but there still is the revolutionary transformation of one into the other. Now, you can call an eggplant an aubergine or an aubergine an eggplant. Marx and Lenin still were talking about the same thing. I mean, I just completely BTFO'd you, kid.
So Lenin begins using the term socialism to refer to lower phase communism, which Marx never did, and some of his formulations do differ from Marx, but at this point, Lenin's narrative is still, in essence,
dude, give us a fucking source. You're so dumb.
Marx's narrative, with merely some terminological changes. Both socialism and communism here still refer to moneyless, classless society. The distorted narrative that is popular nowadays only fully emerges after Lenin's death. However, already here...
Okay, so socialism and communism are the same thing. Let's just call it communism. Communism is stateless. You agree. The state, revolutionary dictatorship of the proletariat. Socialism, communism. Like, if you actually read a book, you would realize how dumb you are and how lazy you are. Like, these are lazy left-com arguments.
Some confusion is introduced, because when new readers of Marx already have the Leninist distinction between socialism and communism in mind, they are often confused by the way Marx uses the term communism. But of course, people will not yet be convinced. We need to go further. Don't close the video yet. So, if both lower phase...
Oh, you make me want to because you're a fucking idiot.
...and higher phase communism is stateless, what about the measures in the Communist Manifesto? Since they demand centralization and nationalization in the hands of the state, they obviously presuppose the state. And because they also demand a certain form of taxation, they presuppose money. And so all the other elements that communism, whether lower or higher phase, is supposed to do away with. Well, these are not measures for the establishment of the socialist mode of production itself. That is nowhere said.
Yeah, okay, I agree with you there.
People assume that the working class taking power is socialism, but Marx never says this. If he did, that would in fact contradict his own views.
I agree that Marx saying that workers owning the means of production isn't socialism, but it is a part of socialism. I mean, let us imagine a free, like a federation, a free society of men with the means of production held in common. I'm butchering that quote, but I mean, it's literally on the back of Capital Volume 1, a book you've clearly never read.
Things like taxation and nationalization still presuppose money, capital accumulation. In other words, all the elements that Marx analyzes as part of the capitalist mode of production. The measures in the manifesto do not concern socialism, however. Rather, these are measures intended for the transitionary period. Transitionary period, you might say. What the hell is that? As the common narrative goes, I thought that you have capitalism, then socialism is established when the working class seizes state power, and then after a long period of development, you finally have communism.
Yeah, moron. What do you think socialism is? It's a transitory period. I mean, you like prove that the higher phase and lower phase. Show me the quote where he says that they're two distinct modes of production. He doesn't. Why doesn't he say between capitalist and the lower phase and higher phase of communist society? He just says communist society.
Well, Marx clearly states, for example, in Critique of the Gotha program, that
Between capitalist and communist society, there lies the period of revolutionary
Oh, they even got ecstasy to do it. They even got ecstasy to do it. Oh my god. I thought you guys were anarchists, not left comms. Sexisty is the anti-Leninist left com.
transformation of one into the other. Corresponding to this is also a transition period in which the state can be nothing but the revolutionary dictatorship of the proletariat.
if you're interested in what a dictatorship of the proletariat is, I encourage you to watch the third part of my collaboration with Anarcho-Pack and Red Plateaus, in which
Who the fuck is Red Plateau? It's probably Cuck philosophy. What a fitting name, dude. Anarcho-Pack. I mean, I can insult Anarcho-Pack all day, but fuck it. I mean,
I go into this topic. Dictatorship here does not mean what it means in common discourse nowadays, rule by a dictator. Rather, it means absolute authority.
No
The
shit.
dictatorship of the proletariat is the absolute authority of the working class.
The translation of dictatorship into German anyway is it means more along the line of rule instead of like absolute, dictatorship. It's a different translation in German.
Just as capitalism is the dictatorship of the bourgeoisie, absolute authority of the capitalist class.
No fucking
As Marx
way.
clearly states, and contrary to popular claims, the dictatorship of the proletariat is not socialism or lower-face communism, because it is the means by which the working class exerts its will over other classes, and socialism or lower-face communism is classless. Indeed, if
Okay, what did you just say? You just said it's not so. Okay, so the reason why he makes this argument is because he is replacing the word socialism with communism, and he's replacing the word socialism with the dictatorship of the proletariat. But the transitory period is socialism. Like, it's distinct from communism. So, I mean, scientific socialism. I mean, how do you have the withering away of the state, but you also have the state? Like, okay, so you have the transitory period, then socialism, then communism. That would beg the question, how many modes of production are there until we get there? There's only one mode of production, communism.
it is the means by which the working class exerts its will over other classes, and socialism or lower-face communism is classless. Indeed, if one
I don't want to repeat my
argued
argument.
that the dictatorship of the proletariat is socialism, or in Marxist terminology, lower-face communism, one would be led into the absurd claim that the transition from capitalism to communism is communism. So now we
This is, okay, folks, this is literally just a mincing of words. Notice how no Marx has been cited? It's literally just a mincing of words here. Oh, no Lenin cited either.
can correct the aforementioned narrative into one that Marx believed in, along with other great Marxist theories such as Rosa Luxemburg or Lenin. First, you have capitalism. Then the workers seize power. This is the transitionary period, or the dictatorship of the proletariat. The state, markets, and classes, and
I'm gonna nitpick because I fucking can. Capitalism is not the state, markets, and classes, you moron. Capitalism is generalized commodity production, wage labor, and a governance of commodities according to the law of value. That's capitalism. What the fuck? Transitory period, dictatorship of the proletariat? Markets? Really? Markets? I mean, within the cooperative society based on common ownership of the means of production, the producers do not exchange their product. So what is the transitory period then? Is the transitory period not the revolutionary dictatorship of the proletariat? Are you saying that the transitory period has private ownership of the means of production? Producers do not exchange their products. Yeah, moron. There are no markets in socialism. I mean, is socialism not the cooperative society based on common ownership of the means of production? Yeah, the state exists, but the state. I mean, you even admitted it. And this is another moron argument. You idiot. I mean, you have to be obfuscating the facts on purpose. You're stating the state and the transitory period dictatorship of the proletariat is the same thing as the capitalist state. And there's classes. Yeah, there's classes. There's class oppression in
other words,
socialism.
capitalism still exists, merely with the working class now in power.
The fuck? Capitalism doesn't exist. Capitalism doesn't exist because, according to Marx, there is no exchange of products. Therefore, there is no generalized commodity production. Therefore, the law of value is not the governance of those commodities. Therefore, there is no wage labor.
Power. The process begins to vanquish classes. Once the working class has defeated the bourgeoisie, lower-face communism is established and has no states, no money, and no classes.
Okay, this is a trot argument. This is a left-com/trot argument. And I've heard this argument a billion times. Some people actually argue better than this, but this fucking moron doesn't even know how to. He doesn't even understand the argument. Like, do you not know what what a mode of production is? Like,
But still has material incentives for work. After a long period of development, higher-face communism emerges, which, just like the lower-face,
material incentives for work. What do you mean, idiot? In every mode of production to ever exist, there is a material incentive. There is a incentive for wealth, which is use values. So, and the incentives for work are not labor vouchers. I mean, labor vouchers are just a means of which you exchange your labor time for other products of the same labor time.
has no states, no money, no classes, but with material incentives replaced with free access to the society's products. So the measures written down in the Communist Manifesto are not measures for establishing the socialist mode of production.
Yeah, no shit. They're not even measures for establishing so-called the transitory period. They were demands made upon upon actually really the three main capitalist economies of the time.
Indeed, they can't be, because none of the measures involve fundamental changes in the mode of production. Rather, they're measures meant for the transitionary period.
Yeah, no shit, Sherlock.
Measures by which the working class exerts its will on all other classes. Now, some may say, who cares if we say that the state exists in the transitionary period or in the socialist period? That's merely a semantic difference, and it doesn't change the fact that Marx saw the state as necessary for socialism to be established. That's completely fair, and so we need to go even further. The story doesn't end here. After all, the development of Marxist thought did not end with the first release of the Communist Manifesto. At that point, one of the most important developments in Marxist thought was yet to come. In 1871, something happened which changed Marx's entire thinking about the state: the Paris Commune. The Paris Commune was a government established by revolutionary workers in Paris, which implemented a radical form of democracy that allowed regular working people to take active participation in political decision-making. It made incredible achievements in political practice and lasted for just 2 months before being crushed by the French military in a bloody massacre. In the face of this event, it's not like Marx's views just changed on a whim. He always emphasized that one's political theory must be informed by historical developments, and this was for Marx an event of extreme historical significance because he took it to be the first historical instance of the dictatorship of the proletariat. It showed everyone what it means for.
Yeah, there weren't revolutions, bourgeois or proletarian, in Marx's life, except for really 1848 in the Paris
Purpose to be
Commune.
in power. This event was so significant that a year later, Marx and Engels wrote a new preface to the Communist Manifesto, in which they say that the aforementioned revolutionary measures listed in the manifesto have now become obsolete.
One thing especially was true for the Commune is that the working class cannot simply lay hold of the ready-made state machinery and wield it for its own purposes.
Hey, I have an idea. There's this book called State and Revolution. I know, calm down. It's a book. It has words, and it doesn't have pictures, I'm sorry. But you kind of have to read these in order to understand things. Okay, are you ready? Let me grab your hand. Okay? And yes, I am having fun sounding like a condescending asshole because I earned the armchair, buddy. You're a little LARPy left comm. You haven't earned the armchair. I'm not going to attempt to summarize the entirety of this chapter, but I am going to encourage you to read it. I can't summarize this chapter without misrepresenting it. So I really recommend you read this, especially section 2. So basically, chapter 3 of State and Revolution, I would like them to bring it up and try to essentially debunk it. I know they aren't because, first of all, they don't fucking read. Second of all, they're afraid that once they start actually reading chapter 3, they'll discover that essentially they're just basically misrepresenting Marx. And another thing as well is that they're just repeating tired leftcom arguments without actually addressing Lenin himself.
Not only did Marx and Engels conclude that the 10-step revolutionary program they previously proposed had become in many details antiquated, they also concluded that the state as it exists cannot simply be wielded by the working class for its own purposes. It is by nature bourgeois and must be destroyed and replaced by entirely new, radically democratic working class institutions.
Yeah, I mean, how does this contradict Lenin? I mean, this is literally what Lenin says in chapter 3.
Further, in the original manifesto, chapter 3 contained the statement that in Germany it is the task of the real revolutionary party to carry through the strictest centralization.
Yeah.
After the experience of the Commune, the manifesto was now updated with a footnote renouncing this earlier statement.
Yeah, Marx actually says something in Critique of the Gothic program pretty similar. Now, the program does not deal with this nor the future state of communist society. He talks about how all of these, institutions, universal suffrage, direct legislation, popular rights, people's militia, they are an echo of the bourgeois People's Party of the League of Peace and Freedom. They are all demands which have already been realized in they are all demands which have basically been realized by the present day state. Now, Marx is against the present day state, but he wants a revolutionary dictatorship of the proletariat. So all you're doing is saying, hey, if a state exists in socialism, or as you call the transitory period, and the state exists in capitalism, therefore they must be the same thing. This is just a complete and utter equivocation. You're a moron. And administration by prefects, which was a pure instrument of reaction. Now, tell me where Marx thinks that workers in the dictatorship of the proletariat should just echo bourgeois society. Well, he actually says the opposite.
In short, the demand for strict centralization was now deemed by Marx and Engels to be based on a misunderstanding, because they had believed that the French centralized administration was of a progressive and revolutionary character, and now they realized it to have been a pure instrument of reaction from the beginning. And in opposition to such centralized administration, they now instead favored as the true lever of revolution, local self-government.
I mean, do you really think that Marx didn't have any criticisms of the Paris Commune? Have you even read the preface, dude?
But for a more detailed statement, we must go to the text of the Civil War in France, written the same year that the Paris Commune was established. It is here that we really see to what extent Marx's views on the state had changed. With this text in hand, we can also note that while Marx clearly argued that the Commune was a dictatorship of the proletariat, he at the same time said about the Commune's policies that, quote, there is nothing socialist in them except their tendency. In other words, in the Commune, the working class was in power, and yet there was nothing socialist in their policies. Once again, this is completely incoherent. If one
Wait, hold on.
proletariat, he at the same time said about the Commune's policies that, quote, there is nothing socialist in them except their tendency.
Okay, so let's take a deeper dive into the fall of Paris, and this is basically Marx critiquing the Paris Commune. I mean, he did give it praise. It was one of the most important events of his life, besides the revolutions of 1848. But the Paris Commune, I mean, he definitely had harsh critiques of it, and Proudhon. The members of the Commune were divided mainly into Blanqui, I can't fucking do French, who had also been predominated in the Central Committee of the National Guard, and a minority, members of the International Working Men Association, chiefly consisting of adherents to Proudhon's school of socialism. Now, I ask you, how does Marx feel about Proudhon? Does Marx feel that Proudhon is the best example of socialism? Does he? Yes or no? By the way, the answer is no. Read The Poverty of Philosophy. The great majority of Blanquists at the time were only socialists by revolutionary proletarian instinct. Only a few had attained greater clarity on the essential principles through Vaillant, who was familiar with German scientific socialism. Okay, so what is this quote? This quote is critiquing essentially the members of the communes, and the majority, who are the Blanquists, who are essentially the followers of the Proudhon school of socialism. Now, if you read The Poverty of Philosophy, you would know that Marx thought Proudhon was utopian, and Proudhon was utopian. He was a granddaddy of socialism, but he was utopian. So that is the context behind the quote. Now, what these morons, brainlets, idiots have done is essentially taken this quote in which Marx critiques the Blanquists, who are members of the Proudhon school, which in the Poverty of Philosophy, Marx basically critiques Proudhon and the Proudhon school socialists as being utopian, whereas he is a scientific socialist. What they have done is essentially taken this completely out of context and renamed it, rebranded it, re-fucking, basically put the quote into a different context to where it says, hey, because they had a state, or because they were using a state for power, they we're not socialists.
Once again, this is completely incoherent if one claims that the dictatorship of the proletariat or workers' rule is identical to socialism. Instead,
Yeah, you act like socialism is a fucking monolith, moron.
it's the political form that eventually leads into socialism. Now, just as Marx realized that it was local self-government rather than centralized administration that was the motor of the French Revolution,
Citation needed. It was local self-government. It was local self-government. Civil War in France published like 1871. Critique of the Gotha program, like I want to say like 1875. Yeah. I mean, when was this published? Yeah, like 1871, and then this Critique of the Gotha program was 1875. April or May. Do you know math? That is the question.
so he realized that it is the commune and not the state that shall lead the proletarian revolution. He saw in the Paris Commune a vision of, quote,
All France, organized into self-working and self-governing communes. The standing army replaced by the popular militias, the army of the state parasites removed, the clerical hierarchy displaced by the schoolmasters, the state's judge transformed into communal organs, the suffrage for national representation, not
Yeah, he's like, yeah, this is a good thing. We're replacing the old litany of bourgeois society with, actual communist, institutions. What is he supposed to say? It's a bad thing? Is he supposed to be a little left-com crybaby and say, no, you didn't do X, Y, and Z, therefore it's not technically socialism? This is the same logic as, the national question in supporting anti-imperialist states. Why do you think socialists support Venezuela? Because even though Venezuela is a capitalist nation, they are anti-imperialism. It's the same logic here.
and would have no means of centralized enforcement, as the standing army would be replaced by popular militias, consisting of people elected from the working classes.
You are a moron. Did you just say that the new state would be replaced by popular militias? It's almost like Marx was against the idea of replacing bourgeois people's militias with proletarian people's militias.
So, and if that's not enough, he even went as far as to say the true antithesis of the empire itself, that is to the state power, the centralized executive, of which the Second Empire was only the exhausting formula, was the commune. This was therefore a revolution not against this or that legitimate, constitutional, republican, or imperialist form of state power. It was a revolution against the state itself, of this supernatural.
The state itself. Yeah, the state. It was a revolution against the state itself. By the way, guys, the state can be. By the way, guys, let's use the state. Let's use the state for the transitory period. It was a revolution against the state. Yeah, by the way, let's use the state. I'm just.
And
gonna
finally,
continue.
Engels confirms this when he proposes as one of the points for the program of the German Social Democratic Party complete self-government in the provinces, districts, and communes through officials elected by universal suffrage, the abolition of all local and provincial authorities appointed by the state. So if we
Appointed by the state. I thought there was no state. That's weird.
go by Max Weber's definition of the state, often used by anarchists, which defines the state as a monopoly on violence,
Yeah, well, Marx didn't use that definition, you fucking moron. Marx wasn't an anarchist. Read the Poverty of Philosophy.
over a given territory, the dictatorship of the proletariat would arguably not be a state. It would, however, be a state on the definition often used by Marxists, that the state is the means by which one class exerts its power over others. A lot of confusion in the debate between Marxists and anarchists on the state derives from the differing definitions of the state that are used.
No, it arises from the fact that anarchists use a completely stupid fucking definition of the state that completely neglects the fact that states can be differential from each other and instead treats them as as one autonomous being of violence.
The truth is that the kind of state socialism that Marx is so often accused of is actually closer to the socialism of German politician Ferdinand Lassalle, who was.
I mean, compared to anarchism, yeah, but
The critique of the Gotha program that I've referenced several times in this video was a critique of the program of the Social Democratic Workers' Party of Germany, which was heavily influenced by Lassalle. And in the critique, Marx wrote that the whole program, for all its democratic clang, is tainted through and through by the Lassallean sect's servile belief in the state, or what is no better, by a democratic belief in.
yeah, the servile belief in the state. But you're not. Oh my God, you're just literally taking the state to mean you're just literally equivocating on all states to ever exist. Do you believe? Okay, America has been one state since 1776. Do you believe that America is the same state as it was from 1776 to right now? This is why you guys aren't fucking scientific. You want to LARP as scientific, but you aren't.
First of all, he agreed with Marx that in between capitalism and lower phase communism, or socialism, is a transitionary period. He makes this division clear even in the list of chapters for state and revolution, as the transitionary period is clearly separated from the lower phase of communism.
Between capitalist and communist society, what's in between, okay? What's in between capitalist and communist society is a transitory period, otherwise known as socialism. What does Lenin say? The transition between capitalism and communism. Capitalism, capitalism. The transition, and this is socialism. This is the revolutionary transformation period of one into the other, and communist society. So what actually you just showed is that Lenin is closer to Marx than you are to Marx.
In the text, The Era of the Dictatorship of the Proletariat, he clearly distinguishes socialism from the transitionary period, or the dictatorship of the proletariat, as I did earlier.
Socialism means the abolition of classes. The dictatorship of the proletariat has done all it could to abolish classes, but classes cannot be abolished in one stroke. Classes still remain and will remain in the era of the dictatorship of the proletariat. The dictatorship will become unnecessary when classes disappear.
Lenin did kind of word this pretty weird here, but we have to kind of start from the bottom and begin to the top. So first of all, classes cannot be abolished at one stroke. All classes still remain and will remain in the era of the dictatorship of the proletariat. Socialism means the abolition of classes. Therefore, the dictatorship of the proletariat has done all it can to abolish classes, and when it does all it can to abolish classes, the dictatorship of the proletariat will become unnecessary when classes disappear. I thought socialism comes after the abolition of all classes, but it says right here the dictatorship of the proletariat will become unnecessary when all classes disappear. So socialism means the abolition of all classes, and the dictatorship of the proletariat means the abolition of all classes, right? Because in order to abolish something, it has to exist for it to abolish. So what Lenin has just said is socialism means the abolition of all classes, therefore classes exist in socialism. So socialism is abolishing classes. So in order for socialism to abolish classes, classes therefore have to exist in socialism. The dictatorship of the proletariat will become unnecessary when classes disappear. So in order to abolish something, it has to be there in the first place. You can't abolish something which is not there. We can't abolish slavery because there is no slavery to abolish. You can't negate that which does not exist. So in order for the dictatorship of the proletariat to abolish classes, classes have to exist within the dictatorship of the proletariat. So this is weird. So Lenin is saying that classes exist in socialism and classes exist in the dictatorship of the proletariat. It's almost like he's kind of using them a bit interchangeably. Just a bit interchangeably. Just a bit.
Classes still remain and will remain in the era of the dictatorship of the proletariat. The dictatorship will become unnecessary when classes disappear.
Lenin here saying that socialism means the abolition of classes makes several things clear. First,
Yeah, he also said that there are classes in the dictatorship, and the dictatorship will become unnecessary when classes disappear. So therefore, there's classes that must be abolished in the dictatorship.
that he distinguishes socialism from the transitionary period, or the dictatorship of the proletariat. After all, the dictatorship of the proletariat is
No, he doesn't. I just showed you why.
ruled by the working class, and socialism is the abolition of classes. They cannot possibly be identical. Secondly, that by implication, socialism is stateless. We can derive this through a bit of syllogistic reasoning for those who are into logic.
Did you just say that the abolition of something is therefore a being with... This person just said that if you negate something, like the process in which you negate something is the same thing as something being negated.
Proposition 1, according to Lenin, socialism is the abolition of classes. Proposition 2, Lenin accepts Marx's definition of the state, which sees it as an instrument of class rule, and therefore presupposes classes. Conclusion, if both Proposition 1 and Proposition 2 are true, then according to Lenin, socialism is stateless.
According to Lenin, socialism is the abolition of classes. That is true according to Lenin. Lenin accepts Marx's definition of the state, which sees it as an instrument of class rule. Well, the state and the dictatorship of the proletariat is an instrument of class struggle. According to Lenin, socialism is stateless. No. Socialism isn't stateless according to Lenin. I would refer you to chapter 3 of State and Revolution, but I don't even have to because I could just go back and show you that, there are classes in socialism, right? Because you can't abolish something which does not exist. So there are classes in socialism that must be abolished. And if we say that there are classes in socialism, and if there's classes, then it's necessary, taking the Marxist definition, if there are classes, it is necessary to also presuppose the existence of the state. So therefore, presupposing the existence of the state, because there are classes in socialism, there is a state in socialism. But those classes in socialism are to be abolished.
Okay, but then you may ask, did Lenin consider the Soviet Republic to be socialist? And it couldn't have been socialist according to the preceding points because it still had money in the state. No, Lenin did not in fact consider the Soviet Republic to have established a socialist mode of production.
And here we get an excellent quote from Lenin, from, of course, the third All-Russian Congress of Soviets in 1918. January of 1918.
This is further confirmed in Lenin's text, Tax in Kind.
No one, I think, in studying the question of the economic system of Russia had denied its transitional character, nor I think is any communist denied that the term Socialist Soviet Republic implies the determination of Soviet power to achieve the transition to socialism, and not that the new economic system is recognized as a socialist.
Lenin believed that the dictatorship of the proletariat would involve the abolition of the standing army, the police force, and the bureaucracy, instead being replaced with radical democracy. Quote,
At a certain stage of the development of democracy, it first welds together the class that wages a revolutionary struggle against capitalism, the proletariat, and enables it to crush, smash to atoms, wipe off the face of the earth the bourgeoisie, even the Republican bourgeoisie, state machine, the standing army, the police, and the bureaucracy, and to substitute for them a more democratic state machine, the state machine nevertheless, in the shape of armed workers who proceed to form a militia involving the entire population.
He also quotes in full agreement all the passages in Marx and Engels that emphasize local self-government. But given all this, why is it that this narrative became obscured by the different one outlined in the beginning? The Marxist thing would be to see what material and historical conditions led to the abandonment of the original Marxist view. In my view, one of the primary reasons was the failure of revolution in Europe, particularly in Germany. As Lenin said in the previously mentioned quote, we have never cherished the hope that we could finish it without the aid of the international proletariat. From the very beginning, Marx emphasized that the revolution would have to be international. Capitalism is an international system, and it must therefore be challenged on international terms. If a revolution happens in only one country, it will become isolated, and the only way for it to survive will be to make compromises and trade agreements with capitalist countries.
Okay, so he's probably going to cite the part that Engels says from Principles of Communism. I can't think of the exact quote. It's with Trotskyist. So now he's going to start pushing, I think he's going to start pushing permanent revolution. But, I mean, we're all kinds of ultra-left over here. But, like all kinds of ultra-left. Essentially, Engels had put emphasis on the international aspect of the revolution in Principles of Communism. I can't for the life of me think of the quote, which was removed in the manifesto, which came later. Principles of Communism is a very, very, very early work. I wouldn't take it with a, I wouldn't read it with a grain of salt. I mean, it's a very, very, very premature work. It's like reading It's kind of like reading the manifesto. The manifesto was extremely early.
Will it be possible for this revolution to take place in one country alone?
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah. Yeah. Principles of communism. I guess they right on the money. I've heard this Trot argument before. Um, I've heard this Trot argument before. My response to this argument is, okay, if Engels and Marx really believed this, then why is it not in the manifesto? Like, like you're citing Principles of Communism, dude. Principles of Communism is one of the earliest works of Marx and Engels.
The original plan, therefore, was to keep Russia under workers' control until the revolution in the West happens and make socialism possible in Russia. This was expected as a workers' revolution was happening in Germany in the years 1917 to 1919, and active revolutionary movements were cropping up around the globe. At this time, a big part of Soviet policy was to support these revolutionary movements politically and economically. However, the German Revolution failed, betrayed by the German Social Democratic Party, which used the proto-fascist paramilitary group Freikorps to execute the revolutionary leaders Rosa Luxemburg and Karl Liebknecht, thereby paving the way for the rise of fascism.
Yeah. The rose is for shooting Rosa, by the way.
In these conditions, the bureaucracy swelled up so much that, in his last words of the Communist Party, Lenin declared, "If we take Moscow with its 4,700 communists in responsible positions, and if we take that huge bureaucratic machine, that gigantic heap, we must ask, who is directing whom?" I doubt very much whether it can truthfully be said that the communists are directing that heap. To tell the truth, they are not directing; they are being directed.
Now, Lenin wasn't making an economic argument, actually, funnily enough. He was actually making a cultural argument. If we look right here, he's basically saying that we have enough economic power, right? The main economic power is in our hands, all the large enterprises, factories, but what they lack is the culture among the stratum of communists who perform administrative functions. Let me find it. The idea of building communist society exclusively with the hands of the communists is childish, absolutely childish. We are but a drop in the ocean, a drop of an ocean of people. We shall be able to lead the people along the road we have chosen only if we correctly determine it, not only from the standpoint of its direction in world history. From that point of view, we have determined the road quite correctly, and is corroborated by the situation in every country. We must also determine it correctly for our own native land, for our own country. But the direction of world history is not the only factor. Other factors will be intervention or not. Essentially, what Lenin is saying here is that, hey, we communists, we're not really in power. We're not really like dictators like the bourgeoisie. We're not really in power. Instead, what we are is the spearhead of the people. And that's what Lenin said. I mean, that's the context of the quote.
In the face of the situation, the Soviet Union became isolated and bureaucratized, faced with extremely difficult conditions through no fault of their own. I do not doubt the good intentions of the Soviet leadership, that they truly did want to bring about socialism, but the class situation of Russia and the world generally made this impossible, and the party became stuck in place, incapable of moving forward. Having lost their proletarian base, the party shifted from a revolutionary organization to the representatives of a capitalist society, functionally becoming social democrats.
Okay, in order to become a capitalist society, you need three things: generalized commodity production, no such thing; centralized planning. And guess what? It was actually the evil Stalin man who instituted generalized central planning, and commodity production was not the typical form of production. Number two, no wage labor, meaning the subsistence of the wage laborer to the capitalist, and how that's paid for is essentially the socially necessary labor time to sustain the working class, yada yada. And then the next one is essentially the governance of commodities according to the law of value. None of that was in the USSR. Get right.
State overseers of a market economy. Some Soviet leaders have argued that they should gradually develop the forces of production while continuing to support the international communist movement and wait for it to succeed. However, the solution that emerged victorious was to abandon the international project and instead focus on national state building, which was finally solidified in Stalin's conception of socialism in one country.
Stalin's conception of socialism in one country? I mean, have you even read Lenin? First of all, Lenin thought that Trotsky was a complete radical centrist, indecisive opportunist. Oh, and by the way, the idea that this socialism in one country is Stalin's idea, no. From this, it follows irrefutably that socialism cannot achieve victory simultaneously in all countries, according to Lenin. It will achieve victory first in one or several countries, while the others will for some time remain bourgeois or pre-bourgeois. Yeah, libtard. How long is this video? Like 17 hours long? Look, dude. Oh, fuck. I'm gonna hate editing this. Look, dude. Overall, you're misrepresenting what we say, and I really don't like it. You're a fucking moron. And if you ever talk to me, I would literally give you the hardest facts and logic beating that you ever had. Anyway, this has been Leftism today. Thanks for watching. I'm fucking so tired of these idiots. See you later.